Welcome to another edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the political scene both locally and nationally. The primary season is barely underway, but if the polls are correct, it would appear the two major parties have now settled on their nominees for the fall. However, both of the candidates are facing major hurdles in their quest for the White House. Former President Trump is facing 4 felony trials and some other legal issues. And President Biden was described as an elderly man with memory issues in a report by a special prosecutor. That is part of what we're going to discuss today on Around the Table with Stacy Smith. And here to discuss that topic and more is my astute panel of political analysts. And they are the former and last Republican governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania and as the U.S. Attorney, or rather for the Attorney General for the state of Pennsylvania. Tom now teaches law at Duquesne University. Jim Byrne is the chairman emeritus of the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania. Jim served as the state party chairman during a crucial time for the party. He also served as president of Allegheny County Council and as mayor of Millvale. As we go around the table, we find Keith Schmidt. Keith's background in politics goes back to the Reagan presidency. Keith was the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum in Pennsylvania here, and he was also a consultant to Santorum's 2012 presidential bid. Keith has his own consulting firm. And seated across the table on the Democratic side is the person I like to call the great philosopher of Around the Table, Joe Mystic. Joe is a guiding light for a lot of politicians and Democrats. He's consulted on their campaigns across the state. He also has served in several roles in Pittsburgh city government, including that as deputy mayor. Joe teaches law at Duquesne University, and you can read his thoughts on life and politics every week in the Trib. I want to thank all of you for joining us once again, but let's begin with that shocking report by the special counsel that was released last week that looked into the president's handling of classified documents. The counsel decided not to charge the president, but it is what he said as to why he would not charge the president that has the president and his supporters angry. They say the special counsel's description of the president contained inaccurate and inappropriate comments. Governor Corbett, you were never a special counsel, but you were the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. So what is your reaction to that report and the counsel's description of the president?
Well, I think the counsel described his decision-making process. You know, when you're a prosecutor, you have the discretion, we call it prosecutorial discretion, to decide whether you're going to charge somebody or not. And in that process, you look at the likelihood of conviction also. His explanation really laid out that he thought it would be hard to get a conviction on a single or a couple of smaller counts against the president, and he wanted to explain that. But I think he felt that he needed to explain it to the general public. Since this is a presidential year, the president's up for a re-election in this time, and he had to explain why he didn't charge. I think he was, taking care of both sides of the issue in one fell swoop. I will say he's got an excellent reputation as being a straight shooter, and I think that this report does demonstrated that.
Joe or Jim?
Well, I could kick in on this a little bit. That is not the reason why he did not file charges. He did not file charges because he said that President Biden cooperated fully. The minute this was discovered, he had his lawyers contact the National Archivist, and he more or less turned himself in for this oversight. And the special counsel concluded that there was no mens rea here, there was no criminal intent here, that this was simply the result of staff work. So that's the real reason. As for the report being shocking, I didn't find it shocking. I think that the special counsel overstepped. I think he had a charge, and if he had stuck to what his charge was, this controversy would not have occurred. I've done a lot of reading about memory loss, as most of us have since that report came out. And, these are all just typical things when you have two older candidates. Both of them are equally forgetful. On the one side, you have forgetful, and on the other side, you have forgetful and felonious. And that's the choice that the voters are going to face.
But Joe, I will disagree with you on this. I think that the counsel felt that he had an obligation to explain to the people and demonstrate to them why he made the decision not to charge. I don't think he said I couldn't charge. He said I chose not to charge.
Yeah, he did. And he made the distinction between how the two candidates, former president and incumbent president, handled this issue. And Joe Biden handled it responsibly. He did what you're supposed to do. when you stumble across something like that.
Yeah, as much as
Donald Trump didn't do it responsibly. He said those documents belonged to him. They were his to use, and he's shown them to people around the dinner table at his club.
Well, I think I agree with both of you a little bit. I don't know. I'm so confused right now. But in the end, the debate is whether this council should have talked about the demeanor of the president, an elderly man with that tends to forget things and whatnot. But I get it. I think he needed to do that. I said, because even as a non-lawyer, when you read the report, there were obviously issues that existed that he had in his possession, classified documents, and because of the pressure that builds on the fact that there's a case with the former president, there was a sense, hey, if he should be charged, the other guy should be charged. So he had to clarify it. He had to basically say, there's a reason. Here's the reason why, although he was in possession of these, he did cooperate. He had to give us a reason not to charge, because otherwise there would have been a larger fervor in America than there is already over the fact that there was no prosecution here. You can be mad at him being called an elderly man, but I think that's the reason that he escapes being charged with this crime.
Well, I would not, Jim, I'm sorry. I just want to make one point. Trump is just as forgetful as Joe Biden.
Oh my God, no one's going to agree with you in America on this. No one. Nobody.
I think they will. I think they will. I think a lot of people agree with me. A lot of people agree with me on this. All you have to do is compare the sound bites from the two candidates, and you'll see. Joe Biden doesn't, or Donald Trump doesn't even know who he's running against. He thinks he's running against Barack Obama again, and he's not. I mean, So if you look at it honestly, what you're saying is Donald Trump shouldn't be prosecuted for stealing sensitive documents, secret documents, and showing them to people at his country club, because he's just as forgetful.
I want to get Jim's comments in here quickly, Jim.
Oh, very good. Yes, the difference is summarized in two words: cooperation on the part of the president, obstruction on the part of the former president. It all begins and ends right there. And Mr. Trump is as forgetful as Mr. Biden, if not worse. And we can get into details if you wish. I have a whole list right over here. It'll take a month.
well, we don't have a month in this. We only have, like a half an hour for recording purposes. But let me throw this one out to you. That part of the issue that I have with the president's handling of classified documents is that his handling of classified documents goes back to the time that he was a United States senator, and then he took documents from what they call the SCIF, which is supposedly a secure area where you can look at classified documents, but you can't take them. And he did, to the point that he even wrote notes on some of those classified documents for his ghostwriter for his biography or autobiography, whatever the book was.
My goodness. But the moderator is presenting a pattern of behavior for the current president on classified documents.
Well, yeah, but I also want to state that the former president holding onto those documents and claiming that they are his, and then trying to hide them from the FBI and not allowing the FBI in, that's just as egregious, in my opinion. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, let's call it a draw. On that issue.
I'd love to.
You just made the case as to why he explained the decision that he made.
Right
there. Exactly. Cooperation versus obstruction.
Yeah, let's go to draw on this issue. Okay, it's going to be between
chaos, if I were you, I'd take
chaos and peaceful progress. Those are the choices.
All right. Well, we have to call it a draw at this point because we're over our time limit for this segment. We have to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the political scene locally and nationally. We're focusing on that special counsel's report about President Biden's handling of classified documents. And right now, it appears we are in for a very long campaign. Also, the president says he has no intention of dropping out of the race. But the latest poll by ABC reveals 81% of those polled believe President Biden is too old to serve another term. That includes 73% of Democrats who think he is too old to serve. So, Jim, you are state party chairman. What would you be telling the Democratic National Committee right now, and should they have a backup plan?
Yes, I mean, we touched on this briefly in the segment last evening, but I would reiterate what I commented on, or how I commented on it then. It's always good to have a backup plan in any situation for any contingency. That's a given in any organization, especially a political one, especially one that is looking at to reelect a president with these issues. Any attempt to talk about a backup plan right now in case of an unforeseen event would be a waste of energy. Be cognizant of the possibility that you may need to have that conversation when you get to the convention. Any attempt to do something like that right now in such a fluid situation would be frivolous and a waste of time and effort. What I would submit to the DNC, and many in the party already have done this, including myself, is to be more proactive on this issue. Define the narrative. Be out there more. Show the country more who you are as president, what you've done, and what you continue to do. The comms needs to improve on this. The comms needs to improve on these historic gains we are seeing with the national economy. The comms needs to be more proactive and not being perceived as being in some type of a retreat or defense mode. Attack it. And between now and then, that's what they need to do. But look, at the end of the day, we get to that convention. Those polls you submitted, Stacy, sure, those concerns. They're probably off by a few points, maybe give or take. We've talked about polls, but nothing in there says that these folks who have these concerns are going to vote for Donald Trump. That's not going to happen. And as we've talked about, you have the successes this president has had. If he gets more proactive on these issues before they define him, I don't suspect this will be an issue. I expect the president to be on the ballot in November.
I would suggest that it's becoming increasingly obvious to everyone in America, with the exception of maybe the president, that he's not going to be the nominee of his party this November. I think it's over. It's over. Put a stick in it. It's over. And what's unfortunate for the Democrats is I actually think they already had the DNC and the wheels are in motion for his replacement, and they wanted their timeline. They wanted to hold Biden in place, to have a very short British type of election in which their nominee is chosen at the August convention, and then has a short race where it's harder for us to find or to go after whoever that choice might be. And I keep on suggesting to anyone who wants to listen, I think it's going to be Michelle Obama. So the problem for them, in my mind, is it's happening in February and not in late summer. And now they're going to have to deal with this sooner than they wanted to deal with it. It's blown up their timeline, but there's no way they can ignore it now. That poll doesn't lie. Yes, you might still want to vote for him, but it's becoming increasingly obvious if they just get stubborn and say, the heck with it, we're still running the president, there's no path to victory. And I still think they can taste victory because they think there's vulnerability with the former president. But I don't think he's going to be vulnerable to this elderly man with a memory problem.
I think his memory problems are hilarious at times. But he doesn't seem to know the difference between his opponent and the former Speaker of the House. I've served someone who is deemed to be an elderly politician, an elderly public official, and the truth is, there are three of us here who are now older than she was when she took office, and they accused her of being elderly, and we're still on this show. So what you vote for is you vote for a team at the end of the day. You vote for policies at the end of the day. And I think at the end of the day, Joe Biden comes out way ahead on all those points. Now, one thing I agree with Keith on, Keith's right about this. Whoever the candidate is going to be for the Democratic Party for president of the United States is totally in the hands of Joe Biden. And he may very well at the convention, he could at the convention just say, I'm moving all my votes to whomever. And that would generate a great deal of excitement and momentum. And but then again, he might not, and they may, after studying the situation, determine that he's still the best candidate to beat Joe Biden, or to beat Donald Trump. So this is an interesting time. The Chinese said, "May you live in interesting times." We certainly do.
More interesting than I want them to be. And I'm going to make some statements that are probably going to irritate not you, but some of the people in the audience. Number one, I don't think either one of them should be running. I think that they are both too old to continue to serve in the role of the President of the United States in these very dangerous times. I think there's a lack of statesmanship being demonstrated by both of them. This is a personal issue that they both want to be the President of the United States, and it's not in the best interest of the country. I'll name 3 presidents who made clearly decisions off the top of my head that was in the best interest of the country, starting with Washington when he limited himself to 2 terms, and that tradition was followed for over a century until we had to, after Roosevelt, we had to make it the policy. Second is Lyndon Johnson, when in 1968, with Vietnam going on, he decided not to run for a second full term, which he was entitled to do, because he thought it was in the best interest of the country, and probably politically the best interest of him. And finally, this is going to shock you, Nixon, who decided that he would resign rather than face impeachment and not put the country through the process of an impeachment for a president of the United States. It works for him personally, but it worked for the country. I wish these 2 gentlemen would sit down and say, I won't run if you won't run. We know that's not going to happen, and we're going to suffer from now until the November election.
Well, very good comments there, Governor. And the one other point I will add to that, unfortunately, as someone in the Democratic Party high up serving, I don't think this president, but perhaps President Obama said, no one ever wants to walk away from getting on Marine One and flying on Air Force One. And that's part of the problem. It's a tough decision to walk away from something like that. We'll take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the economy. Not the economy, sort of the economy. That's one of the topics we're going to talk about. And also as we take a look at the political scene, and it does deal with the economy. Right now, we're in for a long campaign. So which will weigh more on the voters in the fall? Joe, I'm going to ask this question to you. The economy and age issues that President Biden is facing, is that going to weigh more than perhaps the legal issues and the felony charges that President Trump is facing?
Well, look, in both camps, they defend their respective leaders on both of those counts. I think they actually sort of cancel each other out. This age comment from special counsel is a gift to the Republicans, a gift to Donald Trump. It gives them an issue that they can ride because they hadn't had one. I think this race is going to be a choice between the chaotic daily political lives that we all face during the Trump administration. We've seen a preview of that. That's going to come back, and the peaceful progress under the Biden administration. And I think the Dobbs decision is still going to carry the great majority of women voters in this race. And it's always, they're not talking about it. It's not being touted as one of the issues, but quietly, they go into that voting booth and they are not going to vote for someone who says that a bunch of guys in Washington or in Harrisburg or wherever should tell their doctors how they should be treated when they have health problems or health decisions to make. That's just not going to happen anymore.
Well, your question, Stacy, was, is it going to be the economy and age of the sitting president or these various charges, felony counts for the former president? And I know it irritates people when we talk polls, but we are enthralled with polls. We poll everything. We're constantly looking at the average of polls and what did this poll say or what did that poll say? So if you just go by polls, whether we like it or not, there's every indication that all the problems that the former president is having with these various counts and these charges moving forward and cases being adjudicated, his poll numbers are steady and going up. I mean, he gets indicted and his poll numbers go up. I mean, guys, we got to face it. That's not happening on the Democratic side. The economy, the age, the inflation, the various issues that we have been focusing on the sitting president are starting to weigh him down right now. And specifically, age and the economy, I'd even put the economy to the side. I think the age issue is becoming a heavy 800-pound gorilla weighing on him now. And quite frankly, if the Democrats really just want to get rid of Trump, and I think they do, they see him as a nuisance, and it's going to be a nightmare if he comes back. Your best chance to defeat Donald Trump, in my opinion, is to nominate somebody else. So I don't understand why they don't get that.
You talk about economy and progress and Dobbs versus anarchy, 91 felony counts, chaos and divisiveness. At the end of the day, that's what's going to be on the ballot. I mean, our colleagues and professors commented on this already, and he spoke eloquently on it. Folks are starting to see this again. They're starting to see with this former president just what he brings to the table, which is rage and narcissism and vendetta versus an agenda, economic development, growth, inclusion, and respect for women's rights. We've seen the Dobbs case and the effect it's had in conservative states and conservative areas and in conservative elections since it was decided by the Supreme Court. We cannot, nor should anyone out there who's looking at these polls and everything else, underestimate the significance of that case and the fact that it continues to perpetuate and will continue to perpetuate. And Mr. Trump and others on the Republican ballot, including those who think they can recapture the U.S. Senate, are going to be facing that issue this fall, and it is going to have an effect on them, and it's going to support the Democratic Party up and down the ballot.
I think there's two other issues that are still involved that we haven't talked about, and I'm not going to go into detail, but immigration certainly is one. It is affecting the country. It's affecting the cities where these immigrants are moving to now in a way that is surprising the cities and the leadership, Democratic leadership of those cities, when the immigration actually comes to their doorstep and how it's affecting the people that are receiving them there. And the other one, we cannot look past what's going on in the Mideast and in Ukraine. And God forbid that something happens over there that drags us into another war in the Mideast. That could completely change the whole dynamic of this election. That's why I'd like to see two different candidates from both parties.
Jim, you have said several times that the president's team, the Democrats, have to come out with explaining how well he has done for this country, what he's been able to do with it, the legislation that's been passed. There have been attempts to do that already, but it does not appear that the American people are interested in that, or at least it's not settling in with them.
Attempts is one thing. Persistence is another. You don't cast the line into the water once and pull it out and be done with it. It's effective communication at this level requires consistency. We had the best comms team, in my opinion, when I chaired the party. Our team. We had the best comms organization, I think, of all the 50 state parties. We went out there and we got very proactive, and we didn't stop. You can't do something once and then walk away from it. You have to stay on it and continue to define the narrative with facts and with data and with proactivity from the candidate or the office holder. The DNC and the Biden team need to be more proactive on this issue and be constant on this issue and relentless on this issue of the economy, relentless on this issue of this perceived cognitive issue with the president, which I think is a red herring, quite frankly. I do. His issues are no different than the former president's. He needs to be more proactive on it. You don't see as much outrage from the Trump supporters or even his opponents. You do hear responses to the gaffes that the former president makes, but not at the level you are seeing based on this report. Why? In my opinion, because our president, Mr. Biden, needs to get out there more and be more proactive. And I'm not the only Democrat who shares that sentiment. Many at the national level, and many of my colleagues also think the same thing. I'm going to interrupt you. Your team need to get out there and be more proactive.
Well, okay. Taking that, on Monday, the president came out and talked to reporters and said, I'm going to make a statement, but I'm not going to take any questions. And which is part of the criticism that he's facing right now, is that he is not dealing with reporters I guess he talks to them off the record, but he does not do it on the record in a visual platform much anymore.
I'd submit that it's part of messaging, isn't it? I mean, I think President Biden's messaging is not so good right now. I think they could improve that greatly. Donald Trump refuses to appear in a debate. He won't debate the other Republicans in his primary race. And he seems to be getting away with it, but it's the same thing on both sides. Now, I think that Trump hasn't had the kind of scrutiny and the kind of criticism. As Keith said, his numbers go up when he gets in deeper trouble, but his numbers do go up within the Republican Party. I mean, those polling numbers don't show that Democrats are suddenly embracing him because he's been indicted again. You're not going to see that And
Right.
at the end of the day, registration figures still would favor the Democrats.
Don't sell Jim short. He understands repetition. He understands the importance of repetition, and so does my colleague Joe Mystic, because no matter whether it fits the answer or not, both of them fit in Dobbs every program. So they absolutely find a way to bring the issue that works for them in. Then no matter what the question is, they'll bring up Dobbs. So they get repetition, and you're right. That type of repetition starts to sink in, and it is effective with voters, and Republicans have to realize that as well. And maybe they have to be repetitious on things like national security, the border, and the world being on fire. We'll see. But I get the value of repetition.
Yep. We have to take a break, and I happen to agree with you, because if you watch television much at all, after a while, you get sick of certain commercials, and they keep playing them because repetition does make a difference. Again, we have to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the politics, both locally and nationally. We've been talking about issues that could affect the presidential campaign. So, Keith, you are state director for Rick Santorum. You know this state well. What issues you think are going to be coming into play as far as the Senate race in Pennsylvania and the congressional races?
Well, you question whether the top of the ticket's going to matter on these races. I think the lower house is often affected by the top of the ticket more than the Senate is. And I think immigration that we talked about before the break is going to be probably, in my opinion, the number one issue in America when people start early voting and vote in person on election day this November. And I think that would bode well, I'd argue, for Republicans. But that's an issue that certainly the former president embraced during his presidency and since, and he owns that issue legitimately. Coattails are always an issue, but we all know, I think one or the other, the Democrats or Republicans are going to win on the margin. So you're going to have to run your own race, and you're in survival mode in Congress, because you have two chambers that are close to be equally divided. But I continue to remind people that I think the tea leaves for Republicans in the United States Senate are set up for them to win the Senate, even if they lose the presidency, because it's one of those years. It just happens to be a cycle. You always have every 2 years, a third of the Senate up. This time, of the 33 members, 20 are Democrats that are running for re-election, and 3 seats independents that sit with Democrats. So the Democrats have to defend 23 of 33 to protect the narrowest of majorities in the Senate. So if there was ever a chance for the pendulum to swing, my sense is it's going to swing this year. I don't think it's going to be a big majority, but I would be shocked if the Republicans would not hold the upper house after the first Tuesday in November.
Jim, Joe?
I don't agree. I really don't. In normal times, maybe the cycle might come back to the GOP, but I don't see it. The economy's booming. There will be more communication proactivity on that issue, and there's going to be a ton of comms on the Dobbs decision. You're going to see those two things. There's going to be a ton of comms on reminding folks what America looked like from 2016 to 2020. That's all going to be stark reminders to the electorate. So despite the concerns of the folks who were polled, Stacy, about the president's age, despite those concerns, at the end of the day, voters are going to nest on common governance, on economic success, women's right to choose, and a lack of chaos and anarchy and vendetta. That's going to be the narrative this fall, which is going to hurt the chances the GOP may have had otherwise to get that Senate. And I do believe they are at risk to lose the House as well.
Governor or Joe, you have about 45 seconds if you want to wrap it up.
Joe.
Well, I want to talk about the border for a moment, but that's a tough issue for Democrats, and the problem is that the Republicans have a slogan and the Democrats have an explanation, and the explanation is, hey, we passed your bill. I mean, we negotiated and accepted your bill, and then you guys walked away from it, and that's why the border's a mess. Well, the explanation has a hard time beating the slogan, and so that's what we're looking at down the road on a lot of these issues.
Well, go ahead, Governor.
I think it's, as we know, it's difficult to run against an incumbent, and I'm talking about the Senate race right now. And Mr. McCormick certainly has his work cut out for him. It's not impossible, but you will see money coming into Pennsylvania. It could be probably the most expensive election we've ever seen because it could go to the balance of control of the United States Senate. Mr. Casey, I know him personally, nice guy. I don't think he's accomplished that much in a noteworthy issue, but he's been well known there, and the name is well known. So that race is really going to be dependent on how close the presidential race is going to have an effect on the Senate race. The House is a completely different story. They separated a little bit. I'm looking at the State House a little bit. I think at this point in time, it could change. I think that the Democrats will probably control the State House, but the Republicans control the State Senate.
All right. We wrap that one up. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you for watching. And I hope that you join us again for the next edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Stacy.